Welcome everyone, my name is Ayush Verma and today I'll be presenting my research about how artificial intelligence, or AI, is impacting voter perception and trust in Texas elections. AI has become an increasingly influential tool in politics, and my study examines both its potential and the concerns that come with its use. Let's dive into why this topic is so important for the future of elections. First, a few fun facts. False information online is not only more captivating, it spreads much faster. According to MIT News, false information is 70% more likely to be retweeted, and it's spread almost six times quicker than the truth. With the rise of generative AI, almost 90% of online content could be AI generated by 2026. And in the 2020 US presidential election, as you can see here, AI generated content reached almost 79% of voters. With the new 2024 election, that number was expected to be even higher. These statistics highlight how deeply AI is already influencing the political sphere across the globe. With AI playing such a major role in political content, it's critical to ask, how does this impact public trust in the democratic process and elections, and what are the potential risks? In today's world, AI is advancing at an incredible pace, and that includes its influence on elections. Many studies have already explored AI's role in elections, but there's still a lot we don't know. One of the biggest concerns is how AI has been used to spread political and misinformation. One of the articles, as you can see here, investigates how AI-generated deepfakes and false content have contributed to the spread of misinformation, particularly in the context of political campaigns. Social media regulations and AI-generated political content through digital media has also been a major concern, as platforms like TikTok, X, formerly known as Twitter, YouTube, have lacked strong regulations in mitigating the deep root of misinformation being spread related to political content. And that's why the government is deciding to step in. This article by Madden, written in 2024, explores how Texas created an AI advisory board to track and respond to the impact of AI in elections. But even though that's a step in the right direction, we're still not seeing much meaningful work done on the federal level in Congress. Another thing I wanted to explore was how AI models can predict elections. And this essay goes into the baseline introductory material of it. As you can see, they did a study that investigated AI models such as ChatGPT and Google's Gemini, and it shows that they have a preference for left-leaning sources, which could potentially affect the accuracy and fairness of AI-driven election forecasting. Now, while there's been a growing amount of discussion around the impact of AI on the global stage, my research revealed three major gaps that I aim to address. First, there's very little research done about Texas specifically. Texas is one of the most politically influential states in the country. Not only does it have roughly 40 electoral votes, but it's also considered a swing state almost every 4 years. Second, most studies tend to look at AI from a technical or regulatory standpoint, but they fail to explore how AI actually affects voter perception and trust. Third, I really wanted to combine technical prediction modeling with human insight. That would help me draw an even bigger picture into the broader issue. These gaps helped shape my direction of my research and guided my decision to combine surveys, interviews, and machine learning models. That's where my research comes in. So my research question is, what are the concerns introduced by artificial intelligence in Texas elections, and how does it influence voter perception and trust in the democratic process? This question helps guide my methodology, as I want to examine both the human side, how voters and people feel about AI in elections, and the more technical side, about how accurate AI election predictions were. Going into the study, my original hypothesis was that AI's increasing role in elections would lead to lower voter trust due to concerns over misinformation, manipulation, and data bias. I also predicted that younger voters who are more familiar with AI, as they're more digitally literate, would be more skeptical and aware of AI generated election content. While older voters may be less aware of it, but they're still going to be very skeptical of it. However, I did believe AI may have some advantages, such as in its predictive or analytical ability for individuals, or even in its application for political campaigns. To test this hypothesis, I used a mixed methods approach, combining quantitative survey data, qualitative interviews, and machine learning election prediction model. My survey helped me measure AI awareness and trust. My interviews provided deeper insights into voter concerns, and my machine learning model tested how accurate AI-driven election forecasts could be. This method was the most appropriate because it allowed me to examine both the public perception of AI and the actual effectiveness of AI in predicting elections. Unlike past studies, which only focused on one of the two aspects, my approach combined both voter sentiment and AI performance to provide a more complete understanding of the issue. For my survey, I gathered responses from Frisco Independent School District AP Capstone students, which provided insights from a younger, tech-savvy demographic. My interviewees were registered Texas voters, which gave me the edge of understanding how those actively participating in elections would feel about the issue. Finally, I created a basic machine learning model that analyzed Texas election polling data to predict outcomes. This combination of methods helped ensure that I was capturing a broad and detailed picture of AI's impact on Texas elections. So, let me begin with my survey results. I collected from 151 students in Frisco Independent School District, all between the ages of 15 through 18. Even though many of these aren't eligible voters yet, the findings from these results could give a strong and detailed understanding of what the future may look like, as many of these people will be eligible to vote in the very near future, if they aren't already. One of the first things I found was about 2/3 of respondents said they were at least slightly aware of AI being used in political campaigns or election advertisements. But that awareness doesn't necessarily translate to trust. Over half my respondents, about 54%, said that they either disagreed or strongly disagreed with trusting political information on social media. This kind of insight is important because it shows that even though young people are aware of the presence of AI, they're skeptical of the information they're seeing, especially on platforms they use every day. When asked about whether they believe AI-generated content, like deepfakes, has influenced voters in recent Texas elections, over 51% said it was likely or very likely. That's a significant amount, suggesting that students believe AI has a real-world effect on election outcomes, even if it hasn't influenced them personally. What's even more interesting is that nearly 94% of these students said they were confident in being able to differentiate real content from AI-generated political content. This makes sense when you consider that Gen Z, or the tech-savvy generation as I mentioned, is constantly online and has more experience of identifying suspicious or altered content. Still, that doesn't eliminate any concern. The top worries cited by my respondents were the spread of misinformation, manipulation of public opinion, the erosion of trust, and bias in AI algorithms, meaning that they don't see AI as neutral, but as something that can skew truth or even mislead voters. And when asked about the Texas AI Advisory Council, an initiative launched to address these issues, as I mentioned before in my literature review, only 6.6% of people knew about it. That number speaks volumes about the gap between state action and public awareness, especially among the next generation of voters. Moving on to the interview portion of my research, I was able to conduct one-on-one conversations with 14 registered voters here in Texas, including both younger voters aged 18 to 22 and older voters ranging from ages 40 to 60. What I really appreciated about the interviews was how they added depth to the survey responses. People were able to explain their experiences and concerns on a deeper and more personal level. A common theme that stood out was that AI is a, quote, double-edged sword. And actually, one respondent said those words exactly. 12 out of 14 of the interviewees agreed with that view. While they acknowledged that AI can make elections more efficient, enhance campaign or outreach, and help people become more informed, they were also highly aware and worried about the risks it carries. One issue that came up repeatedly was the role of social media companies. 10 out of 14 participants said they didn't think platforms like X, Instagram, or YouTube were doing a great job of mitigating the spread of AI-generated content, especially when it comes to politics. One participant mentioned that the community notes feature on X, formerly known as Twitter, was an example of something that's actually working to counter misinformation. That kind of transparency was seen as helpful. When I told interviewees about a robocall incident in New Hampshire where an AI-generated voice imitating President Biden, advising voters to not vote in the primary election, which resulted in a decrease in voter turnout, their reactions were strong. One interviewee even mentioned how hard it can be to detect AI-generated voices because they're so convincing, especially in robocalls. The fear was that something like this could happen in Texas, misleading voters and decreasing voter turnout. Age also played a huge role in shaping opinions. Younger voters are generally more vocal about the dangers of AI, particularly deepfakes and political manipulation. But some interviewees pointed out that older voters may actually be more vulnerable, not necessarily because of their age, but just because they've been exposed to technology and AI far less than many of the younger voters are. One person said, "It's not that older people can't recognize AI, but it depends on what they've been taught and how familiar they are with the technology." This further strengthens the idea that AI literacy could be critical in building trust in elections and preventing misinformation from taking hold. The third part of my research involved building a simple machine learning model to predict the outcome of the 2024 U.S. Senate race between incumbent Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Colin Allred. I used polling data and other factors like sample size, pollster rating, voter type, and how close the poll was to the election day to build this programming model in the programming language R. The idea was to simulate how basic AI tools can be used to forecast elections, and just how powerful even a simple model can be. After training and testing it, the model achieved a prediction accuracy of 91%, which is considered to be very successful considering the industry standard is anything above 70%. Now, just to be clear, 91% is not signifying a certain outcome, but rather just how accurate the simulations were to the actual live outcome in real life. After this, I ran 1 million simulations using this model to see how frequently each candidate would win. Cruz had an average win rate of about 71.36%, meaning he won almost 714,000 times in all of my simulations. That prediction actually held up pretty well against the real-world results. Well, Cruz ended up winning the election with 53% of the popular vote compared to Aldridge's 45%. Some discrepancies in those numbers could be because of a third-party candidate, but I didn't add any of his data because the data he brought in was nearly negligible in this two-party system. The second graph here on the right visualizes the predicted margin of victory, which is, in my opinion, a better estimator of who will win the election. Cruz's average margin of victory, as you can see here, was about 4.18%. Now, his actual margin of victory in the election was 8.5%, but that's still reasonably close. I mean, it tells us that the model did a pretty good job given its simplicity. More importantly, it shows that it's not just tech giants who can create these tools. Anyone with basic programming knowledge and access to polling data can build a model like this. And that opens up both opportunities and concerns. On one hand, AI can make elections more transparent by analyzing trends, but on the other, maybe if it's using biased or misleading data used to fuel these predictions, or worse, what if people use these tools to spread misinformation based on their conclusions, or even use these to gamble on the election in irresponsible ways? In summary, this part of my study adds the technical angle I've been talking about. It highlights that while AI and ML models can be powerful tools, They require oversight and ethical responsibility, something voters, researchers, and lawmakers all need to consider. Now, what does this all mean? First, even as AI becomes more advanced and accurate, the public remains deeply skeptical of its role in election. This distrust can lead to reduced confidence in the democratic process, especially if voters feel manipulated by AI-generated content and misinformation. Additionally, the fact that my machine learning model was highly accurate suggests that AI can be a powerful tool for election forecasting, but only if people trust it. In my case, my model reported back almost a 91% accuracy, but it's not that useful if nobody wants to use it. These findings emphasize the need for better regulation, transparency, and AI literacy need to bridge a gap between AI's potential and public confidence. Like many studies, my research also had some limitations. First, my survey sample was limited to FISD AP capstone students, meaning it does not fully represent the incoming generation of voters all across Texas, but only rather one specific city. Second, the self-reported data means that some participants may have overestimated or underestimated their AI awareness. My interviews were also limited to only 3 Texas cities due to my lack of connections throughout the state, which may not reflect the full diversity of voter perspectives across Texas. Finally, my machine learning model, while it was particularly successful and effective, it was relatively basic. It did not include possible key factors like how much each campaign spent, where they campaigned, and statistics by demographics, which could be a very important key factor considering how diverse Texas is, both by region, race, ethnicity, and by political affiliation. Lastly, I used a machine learning model rather than an AI model because of my lack of knowledge of AI, and machine learning would do a good enough job for me to get my point across, which is that if machine learning did like this good of a job, AI is only going to do an enhanced version of that. Looking back for my new findings to my original hypothesis, I find my research mostly supported my original hypothesis. As expected, voters do not trust AI-generated election content, with misinformation being one of their top concerns. One surprising finding was that both younger and older voters share the same amount of distrust. I assumed younger voters would be more skeptical, but it turns out both showed very high levels of skepticism when it came to AI-generated information. Additionally, I assumed AI would do well to predict modern Texas elections, and my machine learning model achieved high accuracy, reinforcing my assumption that AI election forecasts would be reliable. Through this study, I developed a deeper understanding of the landscape. First, I've shown that AI awareness is high, but trust is still low. Second, I've demonstrated that AI can predict elections accurately, but public skepticism limits its usefulness in real life. Because if many people are skeptical of its applications, then what's the significance of it having accurate predictions? Third, I've identified that both younger and older voters share concerns about AI in elections, contradicting the idea that only frequent digital users are skeptical. Finally, my study emphasizes the need for regulations to prevent AI from eroding trust in the election process. Future research can absolutely build on my study by incorporating real-time social media data and comparing trends across states and analyzing diverse Texas demographics. They can also advance the basic machine learning model I built if they find programmers with advanced experience than me. They can do this through through a multitude of ways, as I mentioned previously. The findings of my research are significant because they highlight a growing disconnect between AI's capabilities and public trust. Even though AI can accurately predict elections, voters still view it as a potential threat due to misinformation and bias concerns. This lack of trust could have major implications for elections, as more elections worldwide began to incorporate AI-driven tools for polling, forecasting, and campaign strategies. Additionally, my research suggests that if regulation in AI literacy must improve if AI is to be responsibly integrated into elections. Without clear policies, misinformation risks will only continue to rise from here, potentially leading to voter disengagement or distrust in elections. My findings also raise important ethical questions about how much AI should influence shaping the public narrative in elections. Finally, this research contributes to a broader discussion on the future of AI in politics in general. As AI becomes more advanced, it will likely play an even greater role in campaigning, voter outreach, and even policymaking. Ensuring that voters, policymakers, and tech companies work together to balance AI's benefits and risks are crucial to maintaining fair and transparent elections. These are my works cited pages.